Hi everyone, and welcome to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. It's 2026, and one of the things we're going to focus on Fridays here on the studio is going to be hand quilting. And in order to get hand quilting on a special project here, we need to do some prep work. So we're going to do that right after this. So our special project today is our Double Wedding Ring Quilt top. Now I finished this top, I would say almost 2 years ago, and I did a little couple of videos maybe about putting the border on this quilt top, and I did a mitered corner. And I had a little short that went with it, and surprisingly it's been my most popular short of all times, and people continue even 2 years from the point that it was published to watch this video, which is just amazing to me. But we are finally back to finishing this quilt top up. Ever since I was a young adult, one of the things I wanted to do was a double wedding ring quilt, and it took a lot of planning and shopping and swapping out fabrics to figure out which fabrics coordinated to be able to do that. And let's just face it, that's pretty much a luxury today versus when most of these quilts were done by your average seamstress. They typically used the fabric they already had to put together quilts to be very functional for their family. Now, of course, there were some folks who did it as an art outlet, but most of the time they were functional, and they were just trying to make them beautiful as well as functional. But that aside, we're ready to start putting it together. Now, this quilt, last time I measured it, was 96 by 96. Now, batting comes in rolls that are 90 inches wide, and you can also buy pre-cut packages, either for a queen size or a king size. That 96 inches is bigger than the queen size packaging, so you'd have to go to a king size. And pre-packaged king size batting is very expensive in my mind. So what I decided to do was buy the 90-inch batting, and then we're going to add a little piece on one end to get us up to that 96. And then I have finally, after exhaustive searches for looking for what I really wanted, I decided on a backing for this project. And I'm doing just a plain white, and this is a wide backing that I purchased from Hobby Lobby. And I will tell you that what I really wanted was a little white background with a tiny pink delicate flower or something like that. And I looked and I looked and I looked. Started looking before Joann's went out of business. I've looked at every fabric store I can think of, and the closest thing I could find to what I was looking for was in a quilt store in a regular 45-inch width. And by the time I bought enough fabric for this project from a quilt store, my pocketbook would have been empty. So I decided not to go that route and go with just a white background. I could always just leave it in the closet forever and ever, but I've gotten to a point where I've decided it's important and it needs to be done. So here's my backing. Now, I'm not pre-washing this backing because, to the best of my recollection, I did not pre-wash the fabrics for the top. So we're just going to be consistent and keep it that way. Now, I did notice that at the very end of this piece, there was a place that looked a little dark. And you can see right here on the selvage edge of this fabric, there are some dark places, probably where it rubbed against something in the store or in the manufacturing. But I think most of that is in the selvage, and we'll just, once we get it sandwiched, we'll look at where we are. Now, how much did I buy? Let's see. I bought 3 full yards, so this should be about 108 by 108. And that means that if it is truly on the selvage, we're not going to have any problem. We're going to be able to take every bit of that off. So we'll have plenty of that. Now, the batting. I also bought, whoops, it's catching on my, whoops, it might send my mat flying. This is the 90-inch wide warm and white batting. And for this one, I also bought 3 yards, and that we're going to have to add that 6-inch strip, or at least 6 inches to get it to work. Now, let me talk a little bit about cost, because I don't have cost figures on the top. I probably could go back and get an estimate of what that was, because I used a lot of fabrics that I already had. I used a lot of fat quarters. I bought a lot of fat quarters that I didn't use. I bought some that I did use, and then I bought some that I used for other projects. So it's going to be a little difficult to get that this far down the line. But as far as what we're talking about here with batting and backing, the batting I purchased was $39 and change, and that does not include that extra 6-inch strip. And the backing fabric that I bought on sale, and the batting was on sale as well, it would have probably been in the $55 range, not on sale, but on sale it was $39, almost $40. The backing fabric, regular price, would have been almost $40. I bought 3 yards, and the sale price was $29. So we have, just in the backing and the batting, $70 worth of supplies. So when somebody tells you, oh, you can make me one for $50, $60, you have my permission to tell them they're crazy. How about they buy your supplies and then triple that, and we'll talk and see if that's reasonable, or at least getting close. Anyway, enough of that. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about adding the strip to this batting. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. I had it taped closed there so it wouldn't unfurl everywhere. And this is going to be a really big piece of batting. I'm going to take a pencil and just on the selvage edge, I'm going to make a little S in here, just so we know that's the selvage. So when we get ready to put that piece on, we know what side it needs to go on, because it's going to need to go on the selvage side. Okay, we've got a mess here now. But what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to get that 6-inch strip and sew it here on the selvage side. Now, on batting, I have never noticed that there is a true selvage. There doesn't seem to be any difference in the material from this area to this edge of the material. It doesn't have a place where it's thicker or it's stronger weaved or anything that I can tell. So we should be able just to butt it up against the other piece and go. Now, I'm going to take just a second and grab the other piece that I have, and then we'll start talking about what we're going to do. Okay, this is our new piece of batting that we just bought, and this is going to be our 6-inch strip. And what I did was I took some scraps that I had that were more than 6 inches wide. I took the longest ones we had and cut them into a width that was pretty consistent along the way. But I did have to piece it, and I ended up piecing it with 2 pieces. I have one that's pretty long, and then I have another one that's probably about 36 inches. And the way I did that was I laid them both out and put a straight edge on and just cut through both, and then butted them together and fastened them together with a little piece of batting tape. And batting tape is very thin, and it has an adhesive on one side. So if you work this on your ironing board, it's probably best, but I want to caution you to turn that iron low, no more than half of your heat for your iron. And right now I have mine set on the wool setting as we move into hooking this together. But I did it on a very high setting, and it would melt through that batting tape very quickly. And for the first time in a long time, I ended up getting some of that fusible material on my iron. Now, fortunately, it doesn't look like it's something that's gummy and gooey and going to come off. But be very careful with that so you don't make the same mistake that I did. So what we're going to do now is I marked this here. Here's your cuts. Here's the side I cut, and I used a disappearing ink here, which is not disappearing. I think we just had a spell of dry weather, so it's held on tight for me really nicely. And what we're going to do is we're going to try to match this up a bit. Well, that's interesting. And we're going to take that side where I put that S in for selvage, and we're going to match it up with what I've got called here the cut side. And that's the side where I took the straight edge all the way down the piece to kind of cut it in a straight line so it would be ready to match up. Now, let me see if I can find my markings on here. There it is right there. And I'm going to try to have this come off the table. Batting is very sticky. It wants to grab a hold of everything and really stick. And I want to try to get here on the edge. This is going to be the cut side. Remember we marked it a few minutes ago? And I'm here at the end. And then I'm going to take the cut side of the piece we're going to match up with it. Now, I will tell you this, that when you're looking at batting, when I'm going to match up 2 pieces, I take it and lay it out, and I look at what they look like. What does this side look like? What does this side look like? Because they're going to be small differences in the front and the back. Now, which one you choose to make your front and your back is totally up to you. I have really found that it doesn't make a difference with the warm and white. It may make a difference with other batting manufacturers. But I can tell that these 2 sides look like they are very similar. I can also tell you that it looks like, I know this piece was cut off of another backing, and I can almost tell you that the grain of this is running this way. So we're going to have to turn it to make it work. And I don't think that's going to be much of a problem. Now, in order to, let me grab some pins. In order to make this go smoothly, I'm just going to pin this with these overlapping, because there's no way I can pin them with a butted edge. So this is mainly just to make sure that our patch piece we have is going to be long enough and to hold it in place so then we can go to the ironing board and work with it. We have plenty in our patch piece here. We have gone all the way down. Here's our seam that we created. Now I do recommend that you put all of your batting tape on the same side so you have some consistency there. Excuse me. And there are two ways to join this. We could join it with a simple zigzag stitch on our machine. We could join it with the batting tape, or we could do a combination of those. Now, I need to swap out my thread and see how the sewing is going to be. So bear with me just a minute. Okay, sorry for the delay. We had some problems. We didn't have a bobbin filled up. The machine was not filling it up. And then finally we got it all working and have a super full bobbin now. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here from this end. And let me get some of this stuff off of here so we don't have to worry with it. And we're going to match up these seams so that one is sitting right butted up to the other one. Now I have my machine set on a wavy line. For me, that is number 22. And it should stitch all the way around. We're going to try that and see how well it works. And if it doesn't look like it'll hold it together, we'll try something else. But that, let's give it a couple of inches and see how it works. Now I think that will work, but that's a very small stitch. So let's try something, let's try like number 13. And I'm trying to make the stitch length and the stitch width as long as possible. Now that one was pretty good. I think though, we need to back that. The width I think is fine. The length was a little long. Let's try that again. I gotta tell you, it's still not really wide at 5. We're gonna bump it up to 7. It's at 7 wide and 2 long, and let's see what that looks like. Oh, much better. When it's pretty narrow, the problem that I'm running into is making sure that I'm crossing from one side to the other. And the wider that stitch is, the more flexibility I have, a little faster I can sew. We don't want to get really fast, but we do want to keep pretty good pace. We've got 90-something inches here to sew. So let's keep going. Now I didn't speed that up. That's actually how fast I'm going. I'm pretty impressed by that. So I would recommend that if you're going to do this and you have this Janome S5 Skyline, that you use a stitch number 13, and that is just a multi-stitch zigzag. And like I said, I've got it set on 7. It won't go any higher, and a stitch length of 2. Well, let me tell you, that went much better than I ever imagined. Let's take a look at what it looks like. Now, it may be a little hard to see. Let's make sure this mat is underneath what we're looking at. And here is the start. Here's our seam right here where we join these two. You do see a little bit of pucker, but look at that. When we smooth it, it disappears entirely. And we have captured both sides of the batting so that they've joined up perfectly. I see no gap whatsoever. I was really conscious of that as I sewed. Now, when you look at a big piece, you do see just the slightest bit of puckering. But once we get that in a quilt, it is not going to show. Look at that. There's our seam right there. And you can't even tell it. No gaps whatsoever. This was easier than doing the batting. It was quicker than doing the batting. And it probably will be stronger in the long run. And we won't have that extra bit of bulk. Now we do have this one piece here. I could choose to warm it up and try to peel it off, but I think I'll just leave it. It'll be fine. The one thing about a bed quilt is typically there are two things that happen that cause a lot of stress on it. When you're in bed and you're pulling those covers up, you're tugging against that. And the other thing is when you're making up the bed, whether you're pulling it side to side or you're trying to pull it into place, there's a lot of pull and force against that. So you want to make sure that you've evenly distributed your stitches so that that will hold. If you've got an area where you've got a big blank area where you don't have any stitching, and you happen to have something like this where we've pieced it, you're going to have all of that pulling and tugging on that one seam, and you don't want that. So be mindful when you are piecing batting together that you have provided enough structure to give it strength, but don't be afraid to piece your batting together, because once it is encapsulated in the quilt top and the backing, you're not going to be able to see it. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be sandwiching. And I always find sandwiching is a bit of a challenge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover that sandwiching in a separate video so we can give it the time and attention that it needs, because something 96 by 96 and we're going to sandwich it and pin baste it for quilting in a hoop is going to take a little more attention than just putting it on a frame where we're not having to pin baste. So we'll see you with that next video next time we meet on Friday for a hand quilting video. Be sure to subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you like this content. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next week here at the Shamrock Quilt Studio.